And I want to give you his philosophy, and I know he'll do it himself, but I want to underscore it for you. He believes that all children possess the ability to excel academically. When educators expect exemplary performance and inspire students to maximize their potential. With that said, let's welcome Dr. Jalani Jabari.
What inspires people to act? They were able to cut their budget from $1.5 million down to $200,000 for a 1-hour episode drama. It was 1988. The Writers Guild of America was on strike. So the network execs were scrambling around trying to figure out something that they could film, something that they could air to fill this void. Scratched their heads and you know what they came up with, right? Grabbed a few cameras, a couple of microphones, video crew, and they said, why don't we go put a microphone in the face of those who are having a couple of brushes with the law? You remember that show. What's the name of it? Absolutely. And from that, you had the proliferation. It inspired many different reality shows to come into existence. Now, after that point, in 1988, there were shows like what's the show called with housewives?
Real Housewives of Atlanta.
And before the Real Housewives of Atlanta, what show was it?
Desperate.
So, Desperate Housewives was a show where they had to pay the actors or actresses. Then, of course, they were inspired to create the Real Housewives. And they're more Real Housewives show now than we care to mention. So, I said, Jalani, you know, I was inspired by that. Why don't you create your own reality show? I want you all to tell me what you think about this title. The Real School Teachers of Tulsa. The second one is Extreme Teaching. Real stories of the experienced teacher. To the point, ladies and gentlemen, would you agree that there's a distinct difference between reality television and reality teaching? Because with reality television, you have actors and actresses who sign a contract to deliver entertainment. But with reality teaching, you have those who sign a contract to educate and inspire. By the time you walk out of the door today, you'll pick up a process, a 7-step process which will engage your young people right here in Arkansas. Have you ever been somewhere for the first time and felt like you were home? Anyone? My grandmother used to always talk about Arkansas because that was her birth home. She was born in Argenta, which I guess later became known as North Little Rock, and received her degree from Philander Smith. My great-grandfather was born over in Morrilton. So when Dr. Joshua gave me a call a couple months ago and said, Dr. Jabari, would you like to come down to Arkansas with flying colors? I said, Dr. Joshua, yes, I'll be more than happy to do so. With that, Dr. Benjamin, Dr. Joshua, esteemed guests, and all of you, thank you for inviting me to come home. Couple of things this morning. and I know my time is running, so I'll run through. I know you have an opportunity to ask a few questions when you can. Let's keep today's focus on those elements that are changeable. There are a lot of things that happen in schools that we can't do anything about, and it becomes counterproductive to spend time talking about it. Secondly, every educator has a pedagogical toolbox with which they grab their tools, strategies, and techniques to deliver instruction. Today, please open yours and be receptive to those. I give keynote speeches, but our keynote speeches and presentations are very interactive. So I'm going to ask you all to participate, because certainly we have a degree of expertise, but so do you. And the best professional learning sessions happen when there's a collaboration which occurs between audience and the speaker. And finally, if you have cell phones, please put them on vibrate and or silence. But I want you to communicate with me via cell phone. Can you do that this morning? Dr. Joshua, would you mind texting me? Would you send me a text message? For those who are on Twitter, we'd love for you to tweet about today's session. At PDL Solutions, hashtag Jabari Ed Access. But very quickly, as we look at the research and those models that work, that are effective with diverse students in particular. I want to ask you to reflect quickly on a couple of questions, and what I'd like for you to do with your cell, or perhaps discuss with someone once you finish responding, if you could, quickly, take out your cell and text your reply to this question. Or if you want, if you don't care to do that, then hold on for 1 second. So the issue with it, or the way that you do this, is to message first. For instance, if you're going to send me a text message, the 37607 would be like the phone number. Enter that first, 37607. Then enter the text code, space, and your name. Very quickly, because I want you all to interact with me today. And I want to make sure we can use this software, Poll Everywhere, properly. If you have a computer or a web browser and you choose to use the internet, I have the URL for you, http://pollev.com. Submit it and enter your information. If you could just take just a couple of seconds and do that quickly. Has anyone sent yet? Remember, enter 37607 first. First name is good, but thank you, Ms. Cooper, wherever you are. We appreciate it. Ms. Cooper, do you use Poll Everywhere? Have you used this before?
I see that I have for something.
Oh, okay, all right. Anyone having concerns, trouble? So we're going to quickly move through, if we could. Here are a couple questions, if we could, just quickly. You don't have to use complete sentences. Again, enter 37607 first, then where you enter the message, 26022, space, and whatever your message is. Is everyone good on how to use it? If you aren't, I'll come around and help you. First question, what are a couple of the greatest challenges with engaging students in your classroom? Higher university, when you were in the classroom, in your school district, or perhaps if you're not working in the classroom, you're removed from it with your employees. What are some of the greatest challenges in engaging them in your classroom? Now, again, message here, 37607, where you enter the message 25297, space, and then whatever your reply is. Once again, where it says message, just like you enter someone's phone number, 37607 first, and then where you actually would type the text, 25297, space, and then the actual message. Who said they had some concerns of how to do it? So if you could just very quickly, let's take it, 60 seconds, tell your neighbor, biggest challenge that you have with engagement. 60 seconds, someone next to you, please tell them what your concern or challenge is with engagement in the classroom. So if we can come back together very quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, hear your responses. Getting their attention, getting them to comprehend given information or how to present it. Unwilling to participate. What has been your greatest success with students? Lack of motivation, interactive learning, and length of attention span. Taught for a short time. Relevance was an issue. Desire to learn and confidence to step up and step out. Time. Get their attention. Hello, how are you? Distractions, etc., etc. Now, again, because we have to pair and shorten it just a bit, today we're going to look at a few of the effective strategies to engage young people not only in literacy, but in all core content areas. Second part with the workshop, we're going to actually look at a technique of critical literacy. Finally, in terms of text, what is your biggest barrier or challenge with engaging your students with text? Please just yell it out. Staying on task. Anyone else? What's your biggest challenge? Reading levels. Anyone else?
Interest level.
Interest. Reading level, interest level. Comprehension. We'll look at a few of those today. Shortcuts cheating, all right. You ever bought a gift for someone? Put your heart, time, and energy into buying a gift for someone, and they never even use it? Anyone? Why did they use it? Was it because they were one of those eccentric kind of people that are difficult to buy for? Or was it because you don't really know a whole lot of information about them? Or did make the connection to real learning? How about in the classroom? What about the knowledge you give to your students? Do they utilize it? Do they utilize it? One of the biggest challenges with teachers we find is that they open up the curriculum, pull out a lesson, and deliver it without making any adjustments and finding out about them. So when it comes to incomplete assignments in the classroom, many of them fall right in the lap of the teacher. They don't do their homework about the students, which leads me to the first principle. Inspect to inspire. Become a scholar of students. All Inspect to Inspire is a technique for consistently gathering as much information as possible about your students, so much so that you become considered an expert or scholar of your students. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to condense a bit, so please, I would not be remiss, or would be remiss if I didn't mention to you, I have a sheet. If you give me your email address before we go today, I will email you the presentation. So please feel free to take notes, but we'll continue to move forward. Now, how can you become a scholar of students? Of course, there are many different ways. The biggest way, of course, is something that as casual as conversation. Ma'am, how are you today?
Great.
How was your weekend?
Oh, problematic.
What did you do?
Oh, church and church.
So you make the connection with young people when you have the conversations, but I also, when I did, was deliberately gathering information because that was the mother's milk of being able to craft and shape instruction around them. So, what are some other ways? Again, I'll just talk about a couple of them, the 5-3 rule. Finding out 5 things, or 5 ways that they love to spend their free time, and 3 things which mean the most to them. Teacher told me the other day, she said, no, with my students, Jalani, they tell me clearly, know me to reach you, then you can teach me. So you must know your students first. Students bring so many things to the classroom. Would you agree?
Yes.
Some of them bring you so much joy, and some of them have you thinking about changing careers. I used to have a student named Christopher, but we called him Chris Ox, because everything I asked him to do, he did the exact opposite. I said, Chris, why don't you discuss those observations with your classmates? And he just started. I said, Chris, could you please finish the assignment. I said, now, of course, I'm going to outsmart him. I said, Chris, I want you to focus on everything else in the room except for me. And then he looked right in my shoes. I mean, this young man would do everything that he could to be opposite and to be oppositional to what I asked him to do. There are many things that young people bring to the classroom that some will consider deficits. And with those deficits, they use them to explain the achievement gap and say that they come into the classroom and they lack the requisite knowledge and skills. They also say that their parents are not supportive and add little value to their education. We find that there are many strengths, values, talents, and gifts that young people bring to the classroom that are either devalued or sometimes completely ignored. What are some of the things, the strengths that they bring to the classroom that folks ignore? What are they?
Humor.
Say it again.
Humor.
Humor.
Their creativity.
Creativity. Anyone else?
Point of view.
One more time.
Point of view.
Point of view. Absolutely. And for me, it was the desire to interact socially. That was number one. Secondly, their love and or affinity for rhythm, for movement. These are some of the biggest ones. Again, in my first couple of years of teaching, I ignored them. But as you know, clearly, how can you nurture their attributes and build on what students bring into the classroom? First thing, examine your instructional structure. If you know that they have the strong desire to interact with others personally, but you spend 90% of the time either lecturing or directing the majority of the lesson, then we need to rethink the way that we deliver instruction. Secondly, if you know that they love to interact with peers, we allocate instructional time when you engage in some of those peer interactive strategies. What are some of the peer interactive strategies? Think, pair, share. Peer quizzing, reciprocal quizzing, collaborative learning, collaborative teaching. Again, and finally, affirm where they are, who they are, where they come from. Now, when it comes to all of the reasons that young people misbehave in the classroom, what would you say was the number one cause? I heard boredom. Any other? Say it again. Boredom, hide their deficits. If you could respond very quickly, most significant underlying cause of classroom misbehavior. What is it? Most significant cause of underlying classroom misbehavior. (37607) and then text 2318. Boredom, ability level, lack of understanding, not a challenge, lack of engagement, lack of interest, and those are all fairly, a couple of those are fairly close. Do you know that the number one reason underlying misbehavior in the classroom is chronic failure? Low student performance triggers low self-perception, and in young people, what we found, begin to oppose the entity in their minds that caused it. So what we say is that you have to sow success into your instructional fabric. It has to be an emphasis, not a byproduct of instruction. What we believe is first success sells the second step. So how do you create situations of success in the classroom? First thing, clearly, they need to know that you're there to support them. The question they ask when they walk in the classroom is, will I be shoved into shark-infested academic waters? Or will I be sheltered by a secure and shared partnership with you? They want to know that you're going to position them in the best position to be successful consistently. Secondly, embed supportive structures in the learning environment. What are supportive structures in the learning environment? One, create a culture based on collaboration versus competition. Now, how many classrooms students come in and the emphasis on is, well, who can be the first two, who can be the best two, And again, there's not a lot of time for them to actually say, you know what, you're here, Dr. Joshua, you're struggling with it, I got you. So the emphasis in this classroom is not individual achievement, but collective achievement. Secondly, how do you deal with mistakes that are made in the classroom? How do you deal with mistakes? We say mold missteps into modules of learning. Some of our best inventions in this world came first from what? And we're not talking about the young person, the Chris Opson wants to intentionally misbehave. We're talking about effortful mistakes. What we encourage our young people to do was to learn and find the limit, or find the lesson in the limit. Anyone familiar with Carol Dweck's work? D-W-E-C-K-S. Carol Dweck. Mind Steps, one of the most powerful pieces that I've read probably in my past 10 years of reading and researching. And thirdly, design and deliver supportive pedagogy that facilitates success. What do you think of when you talk about supportive pedagogy, supportive lessons? What do you think about? What comes to mind?
Lessons.
Come on, Arkansas Prime Club. You all talked to me this morning. What do you think about?
To things that, on their interest level.
Lessons that...
Whatever you're going to teach.
Absolutely.
Find a way to deliver it according to their interests.
Absolutely. And here we're going right into, of course, the traditional differentiated instruction, which you're very familiar with. I think Dr. McClure talked about the assessment process and using formative practices in the classroom. What is formative assessment? Of course, the emphasis with formative assessment is that student understanding drives the learning process versus standards and or objectives. So, again, if I was going to teach you how to come down here, you've heard of the Harlem Shuffle, right? Anyone? If I was going to teach you to come down here and do the Jabari Shuffle, I mean, I have 2 left feet. But if I was going to grade you or assess you on it, what would need to happen first, or what should happen first? Yes, teaching, but practicing. So, of course, how many of y'all use formative practices in your practice? Phew. Formative assessment, one of the most powerful, not me, research says, one of the most powerful instructional interventions in the last 30 years. So the emphasis, again, with formative assessment is on student get versus student grade. Formative assessment. Let's look at some ways to position students in success when it comes to literacy. Ensure the text is level. It should happen. In some classes, it doesn't. What happens if you're not sure if the text is level? Anyone heard of the 3-finger rule? What's the 3-finger rule? Have them read a short snippet of the text. Hold up what? Hold up what? Not 3, but hold up 1 each time they mispronounce or say a word wrong. If they do 3 in that short snippet, then the book is probably not level for them. Simple rule. Secondly, volume reading. When you hold all other variables constant, prior reading achievement, motivation, prior knowledge, holding them constant. One of the strongest predictors of reading comprehension is increasing the volume of reading. We'll look at that at the workshop. Thirdly, make sure that there are blocks of time for reading. In most classrooms, how long are young people given to read?
10, 15 minutes.
You heard the presentation. Mihalyi, M-I-H-A-L-Y-I, you're familiar with this word? Talks about the flow experience. So, I don't know about you all, but when I write, when I research, it takes me about 10 or 15 minutes to get into it, to begin to have the thoughts flow. And that's what we talk about. Again, if we want to have young people read and engage in volume reading, you have to allow them ample time to begin to flow. I always say that student engagement is about having students find new passions and interests and lose track of time. And having them develop their reading stamina. Now, you ever walk into a store planning to buy one thing, ended up buying 10? Every time you go. I walked into Target the other day just to get some dental floss. And I don't remember what happened, but the next thing I know, I was sitting in my car, I had 2 big white bags with red bullseyes on them that were full of things. Do you know what the psychologists tell us, ladies and gentlemen? They tell us that 90% of the reason people purchase or pass on a product is pushed by emotion versus logical reasoning. You make emotional decisions in the marketplace. What about the place where you give marks to students? Each day in the classroom, students make countless emotional decisions about whether or not they're going to buy into you or your educational product. And when young people, particularly those diverse African American young men, decline the transaction, there are 3 common offenses that they're suspended for. What are they? I call them the 3 Ds. Disrespect. That's the other kind of D, right? Disobedience and defiance. So then what happens is, as opposed to connecting, teachers begin to try to develop the posture of control. Control may get you compliance, but when you connect, you get the commitment. No matter how great your content, no grand the delivery, if you don't connect, you don't get the commitment. So again, when you talk about models that work here in Arkansas, when you have large numbers of diverse students, you have to make connecting with young people an emphasis. How do you get an emotional connection? Throw it out, please. How do you make your emotional connections?
Talk about things that they like.
Talk about things they like.
I just said talk to your students.
Talk to them. Again, please, go ahead.
Feed them.
Food always works. I heard Dr. McClure say something about food. Feed them, yes.
Show them you care.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Number 1 is relationship building. Oh, Dr. Jabari, what we know about relationships. Yeah, but many workers, hundreds of schools across the country and a few abroad. And what we find that teachers say that they're great relationships, but they don't make it an emphasis. So, again, 4C process of relationship building: care, communication, consistency, and commitment. Young people, particularly today's topic, diverse young people want to know what? That you care. But what do they want to know that you care? About them personally. Not just the academic, and that's what happens in many cases. Secondly, communication. Making sure you're open and honest about what's going on in school, with your classroom. And so I know I'm running through. Thirdly, consistently. I believe that teachers by nature are gift givers. The best gift you give is your presence. And finally, commitment. Now, you ever met someone who felt that the only mistake that they made was that they didn't tell you more about themselves? There's something to making a strong connection with young people in your classroom. I call it the ordinariness principle. I share my 4 W's: wants, weaknesses, wrecks, and wins. In case you didn't tell, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just a big vertically challenged. So I talk about my challenges with dealing with bullies in the classroom and connecting with some of my young people that I know have to deal with. I know we're running through. Now, we'll say this and this. We'll take us in the break, and then we'll get into the last portion of the worship. What do you do when they hate what you teach? If you could have met Mrs. J, she would have warmed you up with only an infectious smile that she can give. You go into a classroom any day and you'll see students before school, during lunch, and after school, and also adults, as she was a free giver. She gave much advice and encouragement to everyone in that school community. Second week of school, Ms. J walks in with that infectious smile and says, "Good morning, 114s! Today, you're going to read your new novel, Right Thing." And then you heard the moans and groans from the students. Oh man, we hate reading. But then there was Denzel. Denzel was a lanky young man who towered over the other students who was going his 3rd go-round in the 6th grade. which I can't repeat in a professional setting, reading, and threw the novel against the wall. First Jane said, "What is wrong with you? Go pick that book up off the floor. Meet me in the hallway." She got him out of the hallway. She said, "Have you lost your mind? You don't throw books like that and leave language like that in my classroom." He turned and looked at her and she said, "I don't care what you say. I ain't reading. Suspend me if you have to. I don't want to be here anyway." She said, "What's happening to you? Why are you so angry?" He turned and said, "Mama put me out of the house last week. The last 3 nights, I was sleeping on the park bench. When I go into the cafeteria, they're always teasing me, saying I eat my food like I'm a starved dog." She said, "Denzel, I didn't know you were going through some challenging times like that. You come back to the Bible? Well, I'm a social worker to work it out." They go right in the classroom. She has to do a pre-reading exercise. And they had some rich discussions, led by Denzel, about everything but the lesson. She was frustrated that next day, but didn't give up. So she said she'd try something a little different. She's going to have him come in and independently read. So, as she brought him back from lunch, she never could get them back under control. Denzel was at it again. Stood at the front of the classroom. You all never did this, but she flicked the lights on and off. She did the IW. I'll wait. I'll wait. And then she did the name check. You know what that is. Wrote the name of the board, place a check next to it. Name of the board, check next to it. Still didn't work. And to make matters worse, she had a visitor coming from the State Department of Education. That next day, she'd already had 2 unsatisfactory evaluations with the new teacher evaluation system. What was she going to do? Next day came. First, second, third hour came. Passed. No. Picked the class up in the lunchroom, walked back. Guess who's waiting at her door? Lady, middle-aged lady, business suit, 90, introduced herself. They walked into the classroom, and in big black letters, on her whiteboard, mind you, in marker, someone wrote, "We hate reading." So Miss Jane turns to help, and she tried to ignore. She said, "Please, go to the bookshelf." Hope comes back. She said, "I said, go to the bookshelf." "We can't. They're gone." Just then someone called over to the window. She looks out. White Fang had decorated the lawn outside the building. Denzel was on the floor laughing. Lady from the State Department of Education gave her business card and said she'll come back another day. This day took the students down to the office. With tears in her eyes, looked at the principal and said, "Can't anymore. By the end of the day, you'll have one letter of recognition, resignation." So he sat back, kind of laid back guy, folded his arms, and said, "What kind of things do you have him do?" She shared. He said, "Well, on this journey of learning you take your students on, the first stop you have to make is 123, Student Place. You got to go to their world first." So he had to work with instructional specialists. They went out to the public library and selected a genre, realistic fiction, that they knew was engaging to her students. Brought them back in the classroom, asked the young people, she said, "I know you all really don't like reading. Could you do this for me today? Please read the description on the back cover and the first couple of pages." 10 minutes passed. She said, "Okay, young people, how?" Young person raised their hand and said, "Mr. J, can we keep reading?" And then everyone was reading except for you know who. So she went back, she was prepared. She had 4 different realistic fiction texts with some similar, mores, conventions, ways of discourse that he uses. He picked up the first, scanned it, tossed it. Second one, scanned it, tossed it. Third one, same, and with the 4th. Frustrated, she wanted to teach because she said, "I have to introduce the 6+1 writing traits today." Began to introduce 6+1 writing traits. Corner of her eye, she looks at Denzel. He's taking headphones out of his pocket, put them in his ears, and put his hood over his head. Head down like this. Ladies and gentlemen, this was it. She said, I don't care where you go, but you get out of here. Marches over to him, looks down. Denzel was weak. End of the period. He goes up to him and he said, Mr. Jerry, sorry for disrespecting you, but could I, would you mind if I took this book with me? She said, for what? So you can throw it at one of the cars on the way home? I said, no, I want to read. Next day, came back, he said, Miss J, yes, you didn't like the book. No, that wasn't it at all. I actually finished it. But I don't want to choose to know. Why? I thought you liked reading. I don't want to choose the wrong one. Can you choose it for me? She said, Denzel, let's choose that book together. Every day at 1:30 when it was time for dear, drop everything and read time, she never had to worry again because Denzel would raise his hand and say, Miss J, guess what? It's time for dear. They found an aunt for Denzel to stay with, and as far as his third go-round in the 6th grade, that was his last go-round. As he finished the grade and matriculated on the 7th grade. Mrs. J finished the year successfully, satisfactory, weren't great evaluations, but that next year, the district had teachers come in and observe her teaching. I'll let you out of here in this. On the journey of learning that you take your students on, how often, ladies and gentlemen, do you stop at 123 student place? Because when you make frequent visits there, it opens up doors for them to be receptive for what you have to offer. With that, again, we'll quickly go through the last piece, open up for questions and slides to the workshop, hands-on. What did Ms. J do that got her in Denzel? What did she do? Yes, she got involved at a personal level, but for those who are in the classroom and you're engaged, especially if we're talking about literacy instruction, do you know the favorite genre that piques the interest of your young people? Do you know? And that's what she did again. With young people, particularly those who are diverse, one of the favorite, middle school, high school, and upper L. Favorite genre is what? Realistic fiction and ELA. Historical fiction is also quite popular. What does 123 student place look like? You have your content and you have your tags, so the ways that you deliver it. So, again, with the content, there are a few things that you can do to engage. Contextualize, teach to their interests, include those things of strong meaning, anchoring analogs and metaphors, etc., etc. Had a chance to partner with some teachers, science teachers on Monday, and we were exploring the relationship between surface area and volume. Could have given them a worksheet and said, here's the formula to calculate, surface area. Here's the other formula to calculate volume. To illustrate what it looks like in practice, in science and math. We engaged them by asking them what their favorite cereal was. Then secondly, we talked about the people or the profession that designs cereal boxes. What do you call them?
Designers?
They are a type of designers. Engineers, and actually packaging engineers. And we got into all the different ways they could package the cereal box. Thirdly, we gave them 2 cereal boxes, each pair a group, and then had them predict the box that had the greatest volume. Have them calculate the volume, and finally split the poster board in half, and have them do what? Create their own cereal box that would hold cereal with the greatest volume. Again, hands-on, provided context, something that was anchoring. So as opposed to saying, do you remember when we did the worksheet on surface area? we provided an experience. In science, one of the simplistic models for engaging them in hands-on kind of things now is do, talk, do. Have them do this, engage in a discrepant event, talk about it, and then have them further explore. Now, when it comes to tasks, again, with diverse students, one, it has to be interactive. Is that true for Arkansas? You have to involve them. So again, we talked about there are tons of ways. Someone mentioned think, pair, share. Someone talked about reciprocal teaching, peer quizzing, the various forms of cooperative group, cooperative learning, etc., etc. Do you use any in practice that we haven't mentioned? Moving. We come up with, in practice, use a move checklist and say that you use this checklist when you're designing your lesson, particularly for diverse students. M-O-V-E, the acrostic. M, of course, is movement. O is one of a kindness. Have them provide an opportunity where they can display their unique talents in presenting the information. Thirdly is verb. What is verb?
Flare.
Flare, high energy, stimulating phenomenon. Digital media, games, choice, modern challenge. Now, when we talk about intersecting their interests and experiences with instruction, this is 123 student place. Intersecting out-of-school literacy practices within school. What sort of out-of-school literacy practices are they engaging in? Absolutely. And there's some traditional texts. There, the literature of the Psalms. The hypertext, as in web pages, etc., etc. Number two, most important, grabs them for the first time. Expose them to characters with shared mores, conventions, if you will, customs. Similar discourse patterns. Exactly what Ms. J did. Now, with Common Core, and the thrust for Common Core is to engage students in what kind of text? Common Core state standards. Complex text, right? You all heard about it. How can you engage? Part of the issue, of course, again, because the number one impact on achievement overall more than any other variable is student engagement. All of the variables act through it. So we can't talk about engaging young people with complex text until we help first develop a love for reading. Did I miss any? We're going to go through, with the workshop portion in just a second, critical consciousness and critical literacy. Introducing texts that have social issues that they can discuss, debate, talk about. What was JD? This is what the research said. This is what we've seen in practice with the schools that we work with. They have rich classroom libraries in which texts are easily accessible for the students. They're a kaleidoscope of text in terms of differences in reading levels, interests, text type, and we talked about some of the non-traditional texts. What is, you didn't see that, the number one way to improve in any profession?
Repetition.
You saw it, right? Yeah, okay. You heard it. You heard it, right? Life is lived forward, but understood backwards. Hindsight's 20/20. Having the experience first, and then being able to look at and reflect on it. Research says what? The greatest emphasis on reflective practice is in pre-service teaching, and not with practitioners. There is a small number or amount of research studies that looks at teachers who engage in reflective practice. Now, what's the difference between reflection and reflective practice? You wait, PB, you are talking to me this morning. If I have to scrape and take my jacket off.
Reflection, you're just thinking. Reflective practice, you're actually doing something about.
You think you're doing something about? Going back. Wife cooks a fried turkey on Thanksgiving dinner. I can reflect on that turkey leg when she asks me, how was that turkey leg? And I can say, well, you know what? I think I need another piece to give you an honest reflection of it. So, by definition, reflection is to think, meditate about. You said it. Reflective practice is the process of framing and reframing experiences encountered in the performance of duty with three aims. One, to enhance understanding. Two, to develop professional knowledge. And three, to alter perspective. And of course, the ultimate goal is to improve practice. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, again, I'm not saying this because this is something that Jalani has put together, but this is the mother's milk of improving in any profession, whether you're at university or in the classroom, whether you're in corporate America. Reflective practice is key and critical if you talk about how we can get better in doing what we do. Now, why reflective practice? Why? You all said it. When you reflect using authentic representations of practice, teachers learn more, become more competent practitioners, and of course, it improves performance. Now here's the how. What's the best way to engage in reflective practice? Anyone? Best. One of the most effective. There are many different ways. You saw my slide before? You were up there, didn't you? First, it should be done collaboratively, particularly with a colleague who teaches the same content. Obviously, because there's a familiarity with what you teach. And secondly, why else is an advantage of collaborating with someone while reflecting on practice or using reflective practice? They can hold you accountable. You hold each other accountable. And thirdly, what's the old expression? You can't see the picture because you're in the frame. I can't see the forest through the trees. There are things that others can see that you yourself may not be able to see. Question. And yes, ma'am. The how, there are many different ways. One of the most effective ways to do is, of course, to be clear on the what first, collaboratively structure it, and recorded video is essential. Why is that? Well, research says, we've seen it in practice and research, that when teachers see themselves in video, they're much more likely to be what? To be compelled to act on what they see. Very quick quote. Borkel, Jacobs, Idle, and Pittman, 2008 framing, they said, video records can highlight aspects of classroom life that a teacher might not notice in the midst of carrying out a lesson, and can capture the social fabric of a classroom. If they put a microphone in front of your students, ladies and gentlemen, and ask them what it was that you expected of them, what would they say? What would your students say that you expect of them? You're not going to talk to me. Talk to someone next to you. 20 seconds. What would your students say? Now, I know, they put a microphone in front of Chris Ox. He's liable to say anything, but the majority of your students, what would they say that you expect of them?
Mine would say excellent, because in things that they do, if it's not done at the quality of their life, I'm not just going to give them a low grade. I'm going to get them to redo it until the satisfaction.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we'd like to say is trust the vision and not the visible. Trust the vision and not the visible. Sometimes visions of what they can become are imprisoned by visions of what you see before them. When you talk about expectations of excellence, why should you expect great things from your students? Why? Obviously, it's the ethical and moral and right and just thing to do. But guess what? Empirically, come on, scholars, research says we talk about 5 to 10% of achievement variance based on expectations, right? Which means, of course, that you can increase achievement anywhere. It's been repeatedly shown in research that achievement is increased anywhere between 5 and 10% when teachers expect greater things from their students. How? Where are the how? Expectations are, what are the expectations? Preconceptions of future capacity, achievement, and behavior based on current beliefs. Here's the how. Assess current expectations via reflective practice. Survey the student perceptions. Exposed to exemplars with shared backgrounds to build the belief that it can happen. So ladies and gentlemen, as a quick recap, going to the workshop portion of it, you inspect to inspire to become a scholar of students. It informs your practice. You get to know who they are. You get to know how to shape and modify your instruction. Secondly, you nurture their attributes, provides the bridge for them to buy into you and what you have to offer. Thirdly, when you sow success into your instructional fabric, you minimize the likelihood that they're going to misbehave. There's no one strategy, technique, tool, or methodology that will erase or eradicate all student misbehavior. But we talk about dealing with probabilities and likelihoods. You increase the likelihood when you sow success. Fourthly, partner with them to get the emotional connection. What the psychologists tell us about the emotional connection? 90% of the reason whether or not young people and people in the marketplace will buy is based on emotion. Logic moves the mind. Emotion moves the body. Intersect your interest in experience of instruction, reflect on practice for improvement, expect nothing short of excellence. Now, we're moving through. Why engage in diverse students is often challenged. This identification with school is one of the biggest reasons that it's a challenge. Out of school challenges, etc. How about literacy with text? Two big reasons. Decontextualized literacy approach and the emphasis on skill and strategy. Comprehension difficulties with expository text, cognitive style, cultural conflict, etc. Now, additional reading challenges. Most reading programs, 90 to 120 minutes of reading instruction in the classroom. Dr. Joshua, I think you left the cat in the bag earlier, but that's okay, I'm glad you said it. Out of 90 to 120 minutes of class, Hebert and Brenner, 2010, studied 6 major intervention reading programs. You know what they found? Students, on average, were reading only 15 minutes out of that time. What were they doing during the other time? Indirect reading, circling, skill acquisition, etc., etc. So again, what we find is that when you engage all students, even low income, those who are economically disadvantaged even outperform others. Other reading challenges, core reading programs, reading readiness, moving forward. Now, here's one. Struggling readers read on average 100,000. Average readers, 500,000 words a year. And then those voracious or great appetite for reading, 10 million. What is that like? That's like standing in the end zone and then having the voracious reader move 100 yards down that football field, 100 times of the growth. Secondly, when you look at the average of the volume of reading and achieving outcomes, here are the stats for you. So what do we see? What does the research say? Volume of reading is not an option. If we want to improve achievement, not indirect reading. Go and kill. Challenge with textbooks, not well written, too many topics at the cover, etc., etc. Now, 2 questions. What's happening in this picture? You remember this picture, right? Don't tell me. Don't tell me. You talk about it with each other first. What's happening? Whose voices are missing from this photograph? What's happening and whose voices are missing? Let's take 2 minutes and share that with someone next to you, please. So anyone, what did you and your partner talk about? You know what, I apologize, and we want to share the love with everyone. Someone in the back.
Tiananmen Square when the lone guy faced down the tanks.
Tiananmen Square, which is in what part of the world?
China, in Beijing, near the Great Wall in 1987 to 9, I don't know exactly.
1989. You were correct. You got a question?
No, the question that she bring around, that's the person sitting in front of the machine.
What did he do? You remember the story. Didn't just stand there, right? Kind of shook his leg at the same. Tank tried to veer around him. He moved over. Tried to veer around him, moved over, climbed on the tank. Talked to, stared down the gunman's turret, etc., etc. Finally, someone pulled him off the tank. Pulled him out of the way, out of the street. Guys known as the unknown rebel. What does this have to do with us? Bear with me 1 second, and we'll bring it back home. Can you please quickly skim this out? Any Taco Bell lovers in here? Any Cool Ranch local, Dorito local taco group. I guess it's just because I turned 34 the other year that my pressure seems to be a little high. I love Doritos, but every time I eat them, I feel the veins kind of popping out my hand. I guess that's an indicator that shit. So I mean, that plus taco, I don't know about that for me. Whose voices are represented in the article by this author? Whose voices would you say are represented? Consumer? Young consumer? So, okay, well, let's take a step back, folks. What's the aim of that article? What would you say is the aim, or why was it written?
To
Maybe.
know how successful they were.
Yeah, you don't see that? I mean, you think about it from Detroit, Michigan, Chrysler, General Motors creating jobs. Dorito local taco? 15,000 jobs were created last year because of it. Voices are represented, perhaps corporate America. Voices missing. Does that capture the voice or the perspective of the person who works on the line assembling the tacos? Does that capture the voice of the person who may be suffering from hypertension because of years of fast food and neglect of health? Y'all with me? So when you talk about an effective pedagogy that works with all students, particularly diverse students, I don't know about your students, my students always love to ask me questions. My favorite question when I was a young person, let's say, Mom, why did it? And you know, she would look at me in the eyes of everything and say, because I told you so. Traditional treatment of text assumes that the author is what? Always correct. The assumption is that the author is always correct. The author holds the power in his or her hands. Critical literacy is a powerful pedagogy which interactively engages young people. What is critical literacy? What is it? It's a framework that builds on students' knowledge and interactively invites them to explore the underlying meaning in text, deconstruct, question, and reflect on the message in text. Now, the readers are active participants in critical literacy. They don't just passively accept the message that the author has to give. I'm going to close today's workshop portion with a couple of things. If you could kindly pull out the handout that I distributed at the beginning, or that was distributed to you at the beginning. If you would, flip to the back of the second page, which essentially is page 4. Have a title on it that says Questions that Promote Reading and Examining from a Critical Stance. Questions that promote reading and examining from a critical stance. Is there anyone in the audience who engages your young people in critical literacy? One, I heard. I'm not going to read to you, but here are the questions that young people ask when they're engaged, or younger, not so young people, ask when they're engaged in critical literacy. Whose viewpoint is expressed? What does the author want us to think? Whose voices are missing, silenced, or discounted? How would that contribute to your understanding, and what action might you take on the basis of what you've learned? I'm going to ask that we do this. Can we all, and I'm going to do it a different way, but can we all, using these questions as a framework? It says below that Article 1 and Article 2. Article 2 is on the very back. Can you quickly skim Article 2 and answer the questions on that same page that we were on about whose viewpoint is expressed, what does the author want us to think, whose voices are missing, silenced, and discounted? Again, using the article on the back page of the handout. Americans overdosing on salt. Someone from near the back. Whose voices are represented? Whose viewpoint, is represented in this article? Yes, ma'am.
Researchers and FDA is what I gather.
The viewpoint of the researchers and FDA. Anyone else have a different perspective? This article is written from whose viewpoint? One more time? Okay. How about the next one? What does the author want us to think? I heard most death.
It's the result of most.
Result of most, sure. Yes, ma'am. Some hypertension, all of the other things that happen as a result of it. How about the third one? Whose voice? Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Mainline restaurants.
Tell us more. How is that missing?
I think it's missing because, well, the author talks about the fact that there's a problem with salt intake. A lot of restaurants and a lot of the examples they use actually have measures. They offer products that don't have salt or have less salt. A lot of restaurants have, diet menus or menus that are a lot more healthy, and that's not mentioned at all in the article.
If you're going to take this, very good point, if you're going to take this from the restaurateur's standpoint, would they agree that there should be less salt in American diet?
Yes.
Maybe, perhaps on the whole, probably not, right? How about you? Have you ever tried to go no salt everything before anyone? Someone's doing that, right? It's a big difference in what? Big difference in taste. Did you realize, ladies and gentlemen, that the biggest difference is not necessarily you or I using table salt, but it's in what? The salt that's actually in the product itself. I'm not a big fast food eater. I was hungry, some McDonald's near us, and I went and got a wrap the other day. Don't like the smell of McDonald's. It's just, whatever. Okay? I guess I'm old school, whatever. I was happy because I found something that seemed to be healthy from McDonald's. Until I read the article that said what? There's a high salt content in things like that. So, as we try to bring very quickly, how might students take action? If you're going to use something like this with your students, what are the kind of things that young people could do to take action?
They could start reading labels, what's the daily amount of intake of sodium that they can have per day.
So-
And that wasn't mentioned.
So perhaps give them an assignment in which they had to do some sort of research and actually do it. Ma'am?
They could read labels of everything for sodium content.
Create some sort of PowerPoint presentation that can include their multimedia, images, music, etc., to talk about the health effects. Create a public media campaign, perhaps with poster boards or something like that, that talks about the issues and elements of it. Can you take and use this critical pedagogy stance with your students in literacy? Is it something that works and you perceive working here in Arkansas? Many critical literacy pedagogists use a lot of the articles that deal with social injustice issues. So then they begin to explore it, it's engaging, they critique it, etc., etc. How do teachers better engage and become critically literate? First part is, of course, uncovering your own biases, if you have any. I don't know about you all, but most of us have been schooled in a system that taught us that there's one particular interpretation of text, and that there are not multiple interpretations of text. Secondly, uncover the student views. Make issues of power a central focus. So again, you have them do it, you model it, allow for them next, and then encourage them to participate. And say that the emphasis is for them to participate, not necessarily get the right answer the first time, but the process is the important portion. What questions do you have for me? Come on, UAPD. Mama said never try to stand in the way of lunch, but I understand. Let's go. Yes.
How do you get the student to take the process from where you put it and take it to a different level?
A different level as far as what?
In terms of the process, I mean, so you say go and write an article, go build a chart, PowerPoint about the salt and all. Where do you leave their creativity to take it beyond what you even gave them?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I chose this article for a specific reason. Why is that? Ma'am,
Probably relevant to the group you're speaking to.
I knew that there'll be adults here, and some of it, I don't know about you, I bang pop outs, I know there's some hypertension kind of things going on. It's relevant. So first, again, in being informed by your student study, becoming a scholar students, knowing the kind of things that pique their interest, pique their curiosity, and then those things that mean the most to them, including content like that first. Secondly, providing a range of ways so they can demonstrate their one-of-a-kindness or uniqueness. So in other words, it's not just one sort of presentation. You can do PowerPoint. You have an option to do a bevy of things, perhaps a newscast, in which you have to talk about the issues coming to school. We have the newscast that come to school dressed in their Sunday's best and actually deliver it as if they were delivering a newscast, but you provide a bevy or a range of options for them to present. First, though, again, starting at 123 student place, introducing text that you know is relevant to them. I can't say enough, again, speak all over the country. I can't say enough that the first thing I always do is find out about the audience. Same thing with young people, knowing them. And then, again, not just where their current interests are, but exposing them to new things. But then you whet their interest, pique their curiosity. Dr. Benjamin, did that help? No.
Well, yeah, I just wanted us to be
Oh, you already knew.
knowing that where we start, we've got to be broad enough to deal with what they bring in, which sometimes might be pretty far out from where you thought they would go on this journey as they research and respond to a particular problem that you might have given, like you're dealing with diet.
Sure.
And you have to open your mind to all kind of creativity.
No question.
That might come in, and sometimes you can even teach from that creativity that comes in.
And that's one of the points we mentioned, which is dealing with the non-traditional text, bringing their out-of-school literacies. So they love the movies, they love the things in entertainment, the music, the hypertext, which is web, and or the communication with the text-enabled devices, but introducing them and making them part of what you do. And then from that, you create, you build. So then when you talk about engaging them in the classical literature, Jalani, are you suggesting that this is where students stay for the entire time in the classroom, that you engage them in realistic fiction, and that you don't deal with the classes, that you don't deal with the complex text and things like that? Certainly not. But if you don't get them started first, they will not come with you. So, great point. Yes, ma'am.
I think I missed something, but I only have 6 of the steps.
Sure. It's the inspire process. Inspect to inspire, become scholar students, nurture their attributes. Nurture their attributes. So success to instruction. Fabric, partner with them to get the emotional connection. Reflect on practice. Intersect the interests and experiences with instruction. And then reflect on practice improvement. Ladies and gentlemen, to bring to a close. If you would have seen me do my first year of teaching, I was everything but engaged. And the issue was I replaced a teacher who let the students do pretty much anything that they wanted. So I came in, new sheriff in town, to lay down the law. They said I broke a record for writing the most disciplined referrals within the first 8 weeks. I struggled to gain and keep their attention. I battled the boredom that blanketed the classroom. As far as hands-on activities were concerned, it quickly got out of hand as objects were thrown across the classroom. I spent and shelled out hundreds of dollars on books, tapes, CDs, professional development programs. I got better at depleting my bank account, but practice didn't improve. District sent me to triple EI elements, essential elements of effective instruction workshops. They publicly wondered and privately worried if I was going to make it. A few years later, I was leading district professional development workshops and engaging in effective pedagogy, was promoted, curriculum coordinator, curriculum leader, building leader, and had invitations to present and speak in national and international conferences. Do you know what made the difference for me? I know you're about to tell us, Jalani. What made the difference for me was the process that I chronicled here. It's a book that I published, was actually released just Tuesday. with Corwin Press called Expecting Excellence in Urban Schools, 7 Steps to an Engaging Practice. And what we look at is several practical strategies for engaging diverse students, not just in urban environments, but diverse students in classroom. It's an easy read, research-based, and a solid text. Dr. Benjamin, what other questions do you have?
I have a question for you that I got in the hallway, and I encourage that person to ask you this question, but not hearing it, I'm going to ask it on the behalf of that person. As you move to this new approach of engagement and reflection, how do you measure outcomes? Because right now, most outcomes are measured in terms of a pencil and paper test. So how do you measure the outcomes when these various creative projects are coming in on how salt, and I'm just going to use a salt example. It could be any issue that you are addressing. How do you finally put that letter grade down? That was the question that was asked.
Sure, and I jump back to what I said earlier. Again, have done tons of research, read on a lot. One of the most powerful instructional interventions that I know, that I've seen in practice, that I know in research, is formative assessment. So when you talk about the measurement, again, providing them an opportunity to engage, explore, and develop proficiency first, and then modifying and adjusting, instruction. So formally defined, formative assessment is a framework of instruction in which teachers modify and adjust instruction. Teachers and students. Students adjust their learning tactics. Teachers adjust their instructional strategies, techniques, and tools based on test-elicited evidence. The short of it, Dr. Benjamin, because of course it's university courses, books on formative assessment, is they're both formal and informal practices and ways to formatively assess. So again, I think that one of the biggest things that I see that teachers are guilty of is waiting until Friday until they assess authentically whether or not they actually get it. There are many ways to informally assess mastery throughout the day, and when you do that, you demystify whether or not young people have attained and perhaps even exceeded instructional outcomes. Some of the quick formative techniques: thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle. The use, place of a finger.
The first answer, one, or second, or third, EDC, that one.
Traffic lighting. 3 red cups, red, blue, green. They bring the work in, or they're working on something, as opposed to them calling my name, calling my name. What is it you want? Why do you keep calling my name? Yellow cup. Red, I'm having issues. Green, I'm doing well. Yellow, I'm so-so on it. So these are a couple of the formative techniques that can be used. Part of the measurement. What I like to say, especially in the age of the new evaluation, I was looking at the new evaluation that you have here in the state of Arkansas, at least the thrust behind it. Thank you so much. You got to have some, when young people come in, Dr. McClure talked about it, the value that you bring to the moment. And teacher value, I'm not sure if they're doing it in Arkansas as of yet, we talk about value added. So it's not just one particular measurable in terms of how well young people do on the state assessment. It's the other things that go into it, such as teacher effects. I always like to establish the baseline first. So when they came into my classroom, I knew where they started. How can you fairly assess me on little Jalani or Chris Ops, who was coming to my class reading 3 grades below level? So he should be here by the end of the year. Some of the things are not realistic. However, when you establish the baseline first, it helps provide a basis and an emphasis in terms of looking at how what occurs, how much they've grown between time 1, time 2, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm glad to see a lot of states are starting to move towards that versus just the standardized measure to judge and measure teacher effectiveness.
Okay. One thing I wanted to say in kind of response to someone who might want to know what types of
Could you stand up, Dr. Joshua, and turn around?
What types of assessments will you use? Well, you're looking at 2 different kinds of assessments. One is the formative assessment, where you are basing how you teach about what the students are are gathering. And so you have all kinds of things that way. But you still have your regular general meal summative assessment. So
Thank
at
you.
the end of the unit, the same things that a district may require or your department chair, we still do that. But the results, even from Dr. Jabari and Dr. McClure, shows that this change in your approach, getting students engaged in the learning will impact those summative evaluations. If you are not just going, like you said, to the end of the time and teaching and assessing, then and not knowing, and then after you get the assessments, not doing anything with the results, then you don't know if they're learning. And you can turn a summative assessment into a formative if you look at the results and then you do something about what's happening.
Can I hire you then?
Sure.
And what Doc said, thank you so much. And I know I neglect to mention some time because I'm always sing the praises of formal assessment, but certainly at some point you have to summative the assessment, right? After they've had the practice, after you've learned how to do the Jabari shuffle, now it's time for you to perform for the test. Other questions?
And I think one of the challenges there is how you assess how far the student has come. And the student might have made almost a quantum leap, but is that far enough to write that letter grade down? And how do you explain that to the parents or anybody else that might want to challenge that grade? So I wanted to leave that with the group because it came from the group, and it's very provocative what is being suggested here. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to write down some letter grades, and you're going to have to be able to explain how you got to where you got to with that. I want to ask you to join me in a round of applause for Dr. Jabari. And when you come to the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, we always provide something for you to take back to keep us in your life space. So this is presented to you as the keynote presenter at the 20th Mary E. Benjamin Educational Access Conference at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, 2013. When you tell the time, think of us.
So much.
At this point, I don't really know if it's raining outside or not. I hope you have your rain gear with you. We're going to ask you to complete your evaluation, and if you would move directly to the Health and Physical Education Center, we would appreciate it. And you've been a wonderful audience. Thank you for being here this morning.